Hi, this is a brief synopsis of not Pathrick lecture, that's the oddness of this. This is a brief synopsis of a document that is numerically titled AD 16, Additional Materials, number 16. It is not an official guide lecture. It is a letter from Eva Parakas to the Pathrick community. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to try to give you the narrative of why I picked this, what it's about, and why I think it's important, why I thought it would be very, very useful as a study guide. So it's a bit of a story, bear with me. In June of 1976, the pattern of how the lectures were delivered is there would be a lecture on a specific topic, and then 2 weeks later, there would be a question and answer session. A lot of those questions and answer sessions were not numbered, and they're available through Pathrick membership, but they vary, they're random, lots of questions that people wanted to ask the guide, but it was an opportunity to ask questions of the guide. So 242, Pathrick Lecture 242 was given, and we studied that last month. The reason I chose Pathrick Lecture 242 is because I knew this story, and I wanted to set up for this. 2 weeks after 242 was delivered, transmitted at the evening meeting, the guide held a question and answer session. At the very end, the last paragraph of the question and answer session, the guide made a fleeting reference to an interruption. I'm sure nobody picked it up because it was June and they were going to take their summer break afterwards. During the summer break, Eva Parakas and her husband, John Parakas, traditionally went away to Europe and skied in Switzerland. That was her passion. At some point during the summer, Eva was injured. I've heard a reference, and I want to be very, very careful here as I tell this story. I don't have all the details. Many, many people do not have all the details. I'm pretty good at reading between the lines and understanding what I'm reading, but I also don't want to speculate and I don't want to project into the story. So if you notice holes in the story, that's because there's holes in the story. Someone who was a member of the Pathrick community at that time has commented that Eva was struck in the back. Somebody hit her during a skiing accident, and she was badly injured. Within AD 16, there is a message from the guide, which I'll explain later, and also a message from John Parakas thanking people for their care and support. And in the small note from John Parakas, he mentions that Eva had experienced cancer 18 years previously. And so from the skiing accident, her cancer recurred. That sounds odd to be injured in your back and develop cancer. And I'm sorry, I can't give you any more details than that. But it helped me to read this letter and find out that it was a recurrence of something, not an initial situation. So she developed a cancer along her back and her organs. Once again, I cannot be specific. And she underwent intensive medical treatment and surgery. Now, remember that she left the community in June of 1976. I do not have a date for the accident. I don't know when it occurred. This letter is dated April of the following year, 8 months later. And Ava starts this letter with the following phrase: "For a long time, I wanted to share the experience and the meaning of my illness with all my path friends. As you surely know, this is not an easy thing to do. It is hard to condense and put into words the depth of spiritual experiences and meanings that take often a long time to develop and become clear." So this was her first formal communication with her community. She'd been in contact. She had many people involved. She had spiritual healers, she had friends, she had companions, but I don't have documentation on that. All I have is AD 16 and some recollections of Pathwork community members at that time. So she sent this letter to the community. I'm going to skip ahead for a moment and say that Ava's cancer recurred 18 months, 2 years later, and she died from it in 1979, just after she delivered Pathwork Lecture 258. And as the Pathwork says, this is a spiritual process. This is not a condemnation from God. This is not an accident. This is not, oh goodness, I must have missed something. This is Ava's path. And the reason I chose this for this month is that I was deeply moved by Ava's letter. I was deeply moved by the leader of the Pathwork community back in the 1970s doing her work, looking for the spiritual meaning of this issue, looking for why she needed to undergo the experience. I'm repeating myself, but I was deeply moved by it. She was walking the talk. In AD 16, she included a section, a message from the guide. Now, this may seem odd. Ava Paracas, there are different ways of channeling. There are different kinds of mediumship. And some mediums can have a conversation. They just close their eyes and they hear the voice and they speak it and they go back and forth. And you can simply tell from syntax which is the person and which is the spirit that they're channeling. That's not how Ava worked. She went into a deep trance and she wasn't fully conscious of what was being said. I'm told that she described it as if she was in the very, very, very back row of a large hall. She had a sense of what was going on, but she couldn't be completely certain of what she was hearing. And therefore, Ava Paracas, the leader of the Pathwork community, the transmitter of the guide, had to listen to the recordings and study the transcripts in order to be a Pathwork student. And again, I would like to say that I was deeply moved by this Pathworkers recitation, recount of dealing with a very difficult life event based on Pathwork principles. And I thought it was powerful. So I thought that it would help the community of people that subscribe to my newsletters and listen to this and attend the meetings. I thought it would be useful for them to hear I'm going to call it a senior Pathworkers process. Now, I get people who come to hear me think I'm good at what I do. Everything's relative. I'm not as concise. So I admired Ava's ability to be very concise about her process. I tend to be all over the map in mine. I take extensive time to figure out what's going on, and my explanations are convoluted. So I'm in admiration of this person, of this path worker, of this leader for attempting to face such a difficult situation. So she wrote the letter while she was still in recuperation, 8 months after she had left her community. Once again, I don't have a timeline for when the accident actually happened, but sometime between 6 and 8 months it happened. She did not return to the community from April, sorry, let me be precise. She left in June of 1976. She wrote this in April of 1977. She did not return to New York and begin to transmit the lectures again until October of 1977. So the second reason that I wanted to present this material is what happens to a community when their leader is gone, when their leader is in a hospital fighting for her life, when they are frankly not able to be fully present because they got things to do. What happens to the community? What anxieties rise up? What are their doubts and fears? What goes on there? Now, I have, I want to call this a superficial exploration because I don't want to diminish the fact that there are many people who were there and they have not all shared their information with the Pathwork community, with me on the forums that I am engaged with. But I have the feeling that there wasn't enough general conversation about this to relieve people's anxiety. She may have connected with friends and other leaders, but the community itself felt they were fighting on their own. I think that's how we all feel. And so that's the other reason I thought this was powerful, is that we all are in a fog sometimes trying to figure out what's going on. What did we do? Did God abandon us? Did we not get the message? Did we do something bad? Why is life so difficult? It's a very, very common human experience. Now, we're doing this topic at the beginning of November of 2024, when in the US there's an election. And this election, it doesn't matter who wins because it's so close that the issue of people not being in agreement will continue afterwards. And so there's a lot of anxiety that will not be relieved in the next few weeks. There's a lot of anxiety that has been building up for a very long period of time and is culminating in a divided electorate, a divided country. And I personally see this around the world, where with an optimistic viewpoint, I feel that we are all attempting to do the right thing, but we have different perspectives and we see different ways to do it. And we get into a mindset of my way or disaster. And that's not real. It's very seldom my way or disaster. So this brings up a very large number of pathwork concepts. Ava's absence in her community brought up a lot of this. I felt, just as I introduced Pathwork Lecture 242 last month, I felt, by the way, which is called The Spiritual Meaning of Political Systems. And some people thought I was mad as a hatter for doing that, but Pathwork taught me to face my fears. Look into the eye of this devil you fear. Look it straight in the face. Find out what it's about. And so last month I did that, and this month I'm doing AD 16. If this brings a level of anxiety to you that is not helpful, then just pass. Just let it go. Wait. I'll come up with some other topics in the next month or two that that might be more appealing. But in the spirit of pathwork, to face our fears, to look them straight in the eye and find out what they're made of, I felt it was appropriate to address AD 16 this month, November 2024. And the instrument that I am using, AD 16, is an example of an extraordinary person doing the same thing, looking death straight in the eye. Now, I don't sugarcoat things. So I did include in the study guide that Ava died of this in 1979. This is not something that I wish to hide or sugarcoat or pretend didn't happen. A lot of people are discouraged that the medium of the guide would have to suffer. I'm going to suggest that that is a misinterpretation. I'm imagining, and this is what I'm suggesting that you do with this material. Use your imagination, go into it, and explore it. You don't have to know the facts. You don't have to be right. What I'm cautioning is, rather than projecting, this is what happened and this is what my reaction should be, I'm suggesting that you just imagine what it would feel like to be in that situation as a community member, to be in that situation if you were a friend of Ava or a leader in the community with Ava and the baton was being juggled back and forth, and you didn't want to grab it from her, but you didn't want to leave it with her. It was a mess. I think it's important to go ahead and use our imaginations and go into a situation and see what might be valid for us to see. That's what Pathwork is about, being a little long-winded on this. This kind of summarizes my whole approach and belief in Pathwork. We are here to confront our false beliefs, misconceptions, and distortions. To do that, we have to grab them, be attached to them, believe in them wholeheartedly, and then find out what happens because we're attached to them, so that we learn to release them. Ava speaks of this in AD 16. She speaks of her work in finding her own false beliefs, her own doubts. And again, that's what impressed me about the document. So I thought we'd take a break from lectures, go to some real life situations in a community that was going on 50 years ago. I have, the study guide contains 98% of the material. I cut out some thank yous, but because people aren't sure what I cut out, I decided to go ahead and upload the entire document as well. So don't take my word for it. This is the document I started with, AD 16, in its entirety. And then also in the study guide, I break it apart and make comments on it and introduce exercises just to break the flow so that you have some time to reflect. That's all the study guides really are intended to do for you. So, hoping this all made sense, I thought having a bit of a narrative would be useful. I hope you read AD 16 or look at the study guide, or if nothing else, just listen to the story and consider what it means to you. What does bad news mean? How does Pathwork teach you to address bad news, difficult situations? How do you approach life that isn't perfect? It's the essence of Pathwork. It really is. So thanks for listening to this. I hope you read the additional material. I guess thanks for listening. Take care.